All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the first ever edition of Hunting Confessions with the Carnivore Hunters. Joining us today is our guest, Laura Russell.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, not only is Laura a hunter,
Entry and throughout sugar, bread, pasta, rice, all anything white basically, and ate just vegetables and only occasional vegetables. I've never liked them. They don't like me. So I did keto for 28 years. I lost 140 pounds in the first 9 months. Um, Never became diabetic. I was borderline diabetic at 20. My triglycerides were at least 1,000, and that's as high as their meter went. They don't even know how high they were. Of course, the cholesterol was super high, which I could care less about the total cholesterol. Um, so I did that, fired my doctor because he had tried to put me on a statin, and I gave him back his prescription. Because at that time, everything was a written prescription, and it was simvastatin, which was Lipitor. It was brand new pretty much that year. And so I fired him because I expect somebody that's in a profession to know more about my body than just I do.
Right.
So I did that for 28 years. I became a nurse 21 years ago, a little over that now. And it was so hard going through nursing school and the nutrition portion of it because I knew it was a lie. But I knew I wanted to help people and I wanted to do it nutrition wise. So I bit the bullet, regurgitated exactly what they wanted you to say on their test, passed that, passed the NCLEX, went out into practice and did that. And seeing that, I worked in cardiac cath lab for several years and saw people coming in, skinny fat is what I call it, where they looked like they maybe were like 5'8", 165, 170 pounds, pretty much where you would think they should be. Been on statins for 30 years, ate low fat, vegan. A lot of them were vegans. And here they're having massive heart attacks with multiple vessel disease. And I thought, that goes against everything, that the American Heart Association says and all these other three-letter agencies. And I thought this doesn't make sense. So there was an open heart surgeon who was a wonderful man, very good teacher. And we were talking about blood vessels and what's filling them. And, they always say plaque. And I was like, well, yeah, plaque. And of course, because, TV commercials and everything else, they always say plaque is cholesterol. But when you go to the dentist and they take the plaque off your teeth, is that cholesterol? It's not. It's called calcium, magnesium, and all the other minerals that stick. So knowing that the heart is kind of like a master cylinder, um, and it's electronic component basically. So it draws calcium into it because that's how the contraction works. That draws the calcium into the blood vessels. And so he was telling me, saw firsthand, like these pieces of white look like chalk about that size, like the old chalk they used on blackboards that would fall out, and I was like, well, if it's calcium, why aren't we telling them to stop taking all this, calcium over the counter? And he was like, yeah, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, okay. So that made me even tighten down my eating even more. I was already eating lots of coconut oil, butter. I was still eating a lot of dairy stuff at the time and had a lot of allergies and joint pain in my hands and in my shoulders. And not that you guys have to worry about this, but your wives or daughters will at some point. I knew menopause was coming because I had had a partial hysterectomy. So I knew at 48, 49, it was coming soon. And my mother suffered for 10 years with horrific symptoms. And I thought, all of the women in our family have done that. And I thought, I don't want to do that. And so I just watched Dr. Barry one day and he was talking about the carnivore. And I thought, perfect. I hate vegetables anyway. I don't know if you can see back there, I do can a ton of them because, if the crap ever hits the fan, I want to be able to barter. And my husband still eats vegetables because they like him, but they don't like me. So I just jumped on and said, I'm going to clean this up and see if I can get through all this and get rid of some stuff. And immediately, the first week, my sinuses cleared up. Um, My joint pain in my hands gone completely. You know, I can do anything I want to do. I run, I do kickboxing, I do rebounding, I do all of that. And I don't have any of those aches that everybody else that's 52 that I know, I don't have any of that. And the only thing that I changed was that lifestyle. You know, I just went carnivore. So I always try to recommend, you know, it may not be what is best for every single person out there, because I think anytime you can go to a whole food, you're better off than the standard American diet. But I do think that as long as you have any health ailments, any inflammation, any of those things, I do think that it's something you should try until you can get rid of those things, and then implement one food group at a time. Like if you really like Brussels sprouts, you know, whatever. But that's what I think.
Wow. Wow. We need more nurses like you, actually.
No doubt.
There's a few.
Speaking of that, so what is the reaction on your carnivore lifestyle with your coworkers and like the doctors that you work with?
Well, the doctor that I see every year, she's 49. She was 49 last year. We're 2 years apart. I was 51 at the time. And I went down there for, you know, my labs. I see a doctor once a year, and that's only because I have to for my insurance. Otherwise, I don't need to see them unless I break something or need a surgery. And we went down, and she grabbed my lab work that I had done, and she threw it on the counter, and she stood there and just looked at me. And I said, "What?" I already knew what they were because I had it done at my place of work. So I had my labs, and I knew they were great. I had vitamins, minerals, I had everything done. And she looked at me and she said, "How in the hell?" And we've known each other for several years, so we can talk to each other. She goes, "How in the hell are your numbers better than mine?" She goes, "I've been vegan 25 years." And I said, "There you go. That might be a problem." And she doesn't even eat an egg or anything. And I mean, her hair, it, she's an attractive lady and she's very sporty, but like her hair is like, it's down as long as mine, but there's like all these places that it breaks off super, you know, all these strange places. And it's so brittle and dry looking. And I was like, "Oh, your thyroid's off." And she goes, "Well, yes, it is." And then she pulled out her labs and set them down. She goes, I said, "I don't even want to look at yours." I said, "Let me say, you're deficient in vitamin A, E, D, and K." And she goes, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Because all you eat's vegetables." And I said, "Unless you're a ruminant animal, tell me how you break down the cellulose in the carrot to convert the carotene into vitamin A." "Well, I, I don't know." And I said, "You don't." I said, "But if you like them, you keep eating them. But if you're going to eat them thinking I'm converting that to vitamin A, not unless you had some stomachs put in." And she was like, this isn't the way it's supposed to be." Well, she is somebody she is like a professional student. She has multiple degrees. And so this last one, I said, "Why don't you try some, you know, farm fresh eggs and just see if you can, you know, because of the amino acids that are in that at least." And so the last I heard from her, she had signed up for holistic nutrition. So we will see.
What's
That
holistic nutrition?
It would be more of like what the lifestyle like we lead. It's going to be like knowing what the true vitamin mineral contents of beef, lamb, all the animals are, what, you know, the structures of plants that we can't break down, different stuff like that. So it's more going holistic, which I was like, yes, thank you. Now she works for a big organization, so whether they'll let her practice that, I don't know. I'm pretty fortunate because I do home health, and the majority of our doctors here are super, super old fashioned, statin pushing, omeprazole pushing, everything pushing. So it was hard in the beginning. And I just tell patients, you know, you need to talk with your doctor, but ultimately, I can't tell you to do this or to do that, but it's your body, and you have the right to try whatever you want to do for yourself, and just pay attention to your symptoms and things that improve or don't improve, and share those with your doctor. He may be on board with you, he may not. But most of the time, the docs, I've even had one who sent me a patient and said, whenever you look over their med list, just send what you think needs to go. And I said, okay. And that's what I do.
Wow.
Yeah, I've taken myself off of all of my medications except for my blood pressure. And
Yeah.
we had an interaction where you said use the K2D3 supplement,
Hmm.
which I actually was doing anyway.
Yeah.
Um, but I've tried a couple times taking myself off, and my blood pressure creeps back up there. So
Hmm.
I'm hoping soon I can get off that.
Yeah. And, most people's hypertension is called essential hypertension. And then there's secondary. There's secondary, primary, and I'd say you probably are primary, where it's just going to be longer before you can get that pressure under control naturally. I would definitely stay with the K2D3. What were your triglycerides?
Now they're normal.
They're under
I was like,
150?
yeah, I would have to look, but they're in the normal range for the first time in my life.
Yeah,
Um,
good for you.
they they were 800 and something,
Yeah.
and so but yeah, like I said, I'm everything is normal now except for my HDL is just like 5 points low, and that
Hmm.
was a couple months ago. I think that's probably come up by now.
Yeah. And HDL sometimes you can bring up by like I know people say, oh, you don't ever have to supplement at all eating this way. And I put kidney and liver in my hamburger and stuff when I'm making it, but I still do like the K2D3. I have people who and I take cod liver oil capsule one at bedtime. I'm still going to do that because I have familial hypertension in my family, and um, cholesterol, like the HDL, is always, kind of out of range, which I don't care as long as once you do the ratio of taking your triglycerides into it, as long as that's under 2.0, that's showing like your chances of MI or cardiac disease if it's higher than 2.0. So as long as you kind of have it under that, you're probably going in the right direction. And the hypertension will work itself out. It just may take you longer than some, and that's okay. You don't want to go off too early and end up having a worse side effect.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we were actually going. That was going to be our next question for you. What supplements do you use?
And there's
Yeah.
actually, let's see, K2D3. I take tocopherol, which is a vitamin E. When I first started this, I went to the library, back in the day when you had to read books and didn't have Google. That's where I did my research for several weeks when the doctor, told me I was going to die a fat ass. That's exactly what he said to me, which he's so lucky he said that to me as a 20-year-old and not me now. Um, but I just went to the library there in the small town I lived in, Iowa, and I read all the old medical books that they had there. Most of them were from like 1850 to 1910, before they got hijacked by the Rockefeller family and stuff like that. The medical schools, were taken over at that point, and every one of them started out with nutrition, every single one. So it's kind of like when you take your dog to the vet, the first thing that my vet has said to me every time I take an animal to them is, well, what are you feeding them?
Hmm.
Yet you don't really have your doctors do that. And they're sitting there drinking a Coke half the time, while they're doing your appointment. So, and I mean, how healthy do they look most of the time?
Hmm.
So I have a hard time listening to somebody give advice to me that isn't living their own advice. You know what I mean? I had a nutritionist who came up and told me at the time, and she weighed probably about the same as I did, about 300 pounds. But she was like 5'1", and she was drinking one of those big slams. It was like 1990, and they had those gray big Mountain Dews or Pepsis that you could get, and I think they were called big slams. And she's drinking that, telling me how I shouldn't be drinking pop. And at 20, I was like, Nick, I have no idea what she said after that, because she was not valid at that point.
Right.
Right.
So, yeah, that's what I tried to do, is show my patients, people that follow me, people in my family, coworkers. One of my coworkers, actually my boss, She is more of a aristocratic type nurse. So if the doctor says to do it, you always do it. You don't question it, which is okay. She's been a nurse for 40 years, so that was that style that they were taught. And her vitamin D level was low for a year and a half, and they kept giving her 50,000 units of D3. And she was like, I don't understand why this doesn't get better. And I said, I don't understand why your doctor thinks that doing the exact same thing for a year and a half is going to change. Like, isn't that
Right.
insanity? And so I said, there's this Dr. Pradip, and I said, he is, thank God, teaching at university, teaching the new up and coming docs about, the benefits of supplements and different things that used to be in our food, but it's all been hijacked. That you sometimes you have to take, and I said it's on K2D3, and so I had printed out, the studies that were with that, and I left them on my desk. And about a week later, she was off, and I had to use her phone. I was being worked on, and my study was sitting on her desk, and I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
okay." And she didn't say anything. I just didn't say anything to her. And then she had her blood work done a couple of weeks ago, and I think she had done the K2D3 probably a month. She didn't tell me this until after the fact, but at least a month and a half, had her levels done, and they were like, "Oh, perfect. We don't know what worked, but you're in the perfect range." And she said they didn't even prescribe the 50,000 units, 3 times a week this last time. They just kind of threw their hands up, but they fixed it. And I was like, yeah, it's okay. Let them think that. And she says, well, I've been taking that just like you always tell everybody. And I said, oh, really? But I don't even, I was like, that's good. I'm glad, So she does that. She does kind of the castor oil to the eyes, some of the other stuff that I've come up with that, I've known about. My grandmother did a lot of that kind of stuff. So I always like to try to do stuff naturally if possible. And then if that does not work, then you have to move on to other things. But I think if we stop putting things in our body medication wise to block all these responses, which is our body trying to tell us something's wrong, it would try to heal itself. But, everybody just wants that quick fix. They want it to be, a pill will cure me. And I always ask patients when I go in the home, they're like, I'm taking this medicine for this and this. And I said, so this is curing your high blood pressure? Well, uh, I said, no. And I said, well, what's causing your high blood pressure? Because is it your kidneys? Because the kidneys aren't filtering and that backs up. It's like a serpentine belt, your heart and your kidneys, the way they're connected. And I said, so is that backing up and causing high blood pressure? Do you have pulmonary hypertension that's causing it? Do you have calcium in your arteries causing a blockage, and that's, increasing that pressure in there? Well, I don't know. And I said, so you're not really being cured. They're just treating your symptom. And she was like, yeah, I think so. And I'm like, yep. And so
Yeah,
we're
putting a
working with
band-aid
her.
on it.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And that
Yeah,
just drives me insane.
yeah.
I don't think that's what medicine should have been. And I don't even like that I don't even call it healthcare most of the time. They're like, what do you do? And I say I work in sick care. But they want you to stay sick. And I hate to say that,
Hmm.
but it really is true because um, they have cures for different things. Like I don't remember I don't know if that was Harvoni, but it was leaked. Some of their emails where they were talking the bank. I think it was Saxman Gold Bank had emailed the company that came up with that cure saying, shouldn't we go back to the drawing board and make this more of a treatment? Now, why would
Wow.
you go backwards?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that kind of makes you sad. And I almost left, medicine during COVID, and not because of those issues of seeing that and working in that, because when you go into this field, you're going to work around people that are sick and dying, and you may get that, whatever it is they have, and that's part of, like, you run into the house that's on fire. That's what you're supposed
Hmm.
to do. But it was all of the other government stuff that was that just about drove me out of it. And then, my husband, he's so mellow, he's the opposite of me. And he was like, you're gonna quit? I have never known you to be a quitter. And then I was like, Nope, you're right.
That's funny.
Yeah. So do you use like electrolytes at all, or?
I only use the Redmond's real salt, and what I do is I make water that's called Soleil water. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay. So Soleil water, I take like a pint jar and I put about this much in the bottom of the jar of that salt. Um, Probably, I don't even know, maybe not quite a fourth. And then I put just filtered water over that. And then I use a plastic lid. I have plastic lids for some of my jars. And you let that sit overnight, and by the next day that water has pulled all of those minerals into the water, so you can take a couple teaspoons of that and put it in like a glass of water in the morning. So I do that, and then I always have my water bottle with me, and I always put a pinch of that in every single bottle of water. I got those little shakers of Redmond's.
Mhm.
But I never really had to do the electrolytes as long as I was doing that. I did do a long fast one time, more than one time. I've done several 7-day fasts where, you start to feel a little dizzy and you're like, okay, I know I'm low, and I'll just put it underneath my tongue, and I've been fine doing that. So nope, I never got into doing electrolytes necessarily.
Yeah, I started out not using electrolytes, and I saw
Hmm.
all these carnivores were using the element, and
Hmm.
I had a couple nights where I was laying in bed and my leg just cramped up like crazy, and so
Yeah.
I think that's a magnesium
It
deficiency. I
is.
think.
It's either magnesium or potassium. Either one of those can cause that. And so in the beginning, I always took 250 of the magnesium before bed, which also helps you sleep. It kind of helps your brain shut down, and my brain likes to stay running, so it was good for me to do that. And then I always took 99 milligrams of potassium in the beginning. I did that. Now that I've been doing it for over 4 years, I don't do that and I don't get those cramps. But I had a couple nights the first, when I switched from keto to carnivore, where, oh boy, I've never had a Charlie horse. And I bragged to my husband, I've never had a Charlie horse. Well, I got one in both legs. So I paid for that.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into the hunting. How long have you been hunting, and how'd you get started?
Well, this is an odd story. So I've hunted since 1977. So I was born in 71. So I was 6. And I grew up in a little river town, and so we always fished for turtles and fish and who knows what else. And my grandmother, her and her boyfriend took me hunting starting when I was 6, and it was for quail, um, rabbits, squirrels, pheasants, stuff like that. Because in Iowa, they still have some of those things. And so that was my first experience hunting. And then in 1979, I shot my first deer with her. So my grandmother is who taught me how to hunt, how to can, how to coal pack, garden, save seeds, all of that kind of stuff, because she went through the Depression, and she was the last of 13 children born on a farm in Olds, Iowa. And out of 13 children, my great grandfather got 13 girls. And so he didn't get the farm hands that, he was kind of hoping for. So the last two daughters, which was my grandmother and my aunt Myrtle, they became farm hands. So during, the Depression, if you wanted meat, you had to trap it, fish it, or hunt it. And so that's where I got my start, was doing that. And then I moved to Illinois because I was crazy. In 2000, yeah, I'm rethinking that life decision. But I moved here in 2000 and picked up a bow and was like, I'm going to try this. And I absolutely was addicted. I did switch from right hand to left because my left eye is dominant. It became dominant. And so I had to switch everything. So my guns are all BPS, which just means they eject out the bottom, if you don't know. Um, so that is what I do now.
Cool.
Huh. So what all do you hunt?
I don't usually hunt anything unless I plan on eating it. That's kind of a big thing for me for the most part. I mean,
Us too.
of course,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we shoot rabbits because they annihilated his peas in the garden this year, which I was like, good, that's less things I have to pick, and mess with, which is fine by me. Which I'm not somebody who I don't mind working in the garden, even though it's not something I eat, because I take it to a lot of my patients. We give it away to people. So I don't mind doing that. But rabbit, squirrel only in the fall. I'm not eating them when they're eating those green husks because they're horrible. Deer, um, I like to bow fish. That's
Oh,
fun. Yeah. So that's the majority. I would love to go cinnamon bear hunting on Vancouver Island, but I don't think that that's probably going to happen in my lifetime unless some of the political stuff calms down. If you
yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just not going to put myself there. So, because they probably won't let me back in if I go. So that's basically what I do. I did during first season. I did shoot a coy dog, so it was half coyote, half regular dog. I'm just guessing because of how big it was, and it was kept coming towards my blind, and I even like put my hands up and made a lot of motion, and it still just was making a beeline. And I mean, it was making a beeline. And I thought, all right, well, then today's your day. So, I generally don't like to do that. I guess, if I had like raccoons, we have a lot of raccoons around here. I would shoot them if they were getting into stuff, but I'm OCD-ish and I don't have a lot of stuff outside that shouldn't be outside. So they don't tear up any of our stuff.
Mhm.
So we leave them alone. And I have a hard time shooting possums because they're the only marsupial that we have.
Yeah, we don't have possums here in Colorado.
No.
Yeah, they're ugly, but they are a marsupial. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. I don't want to annihilate them. And they have a reason, I guess, as long as they just stay away from me and don't get in my garage. I don't care. They can
Right.
live a happy life. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite hunting stories that you can share with us?
This first one, oh boy. And this one about did me in. So I think it would have been 2002, and I was bow hunting that morning, and I got up. It was, of course, pitch black out. You want to get out there early. And I was sitting in my truck, and I was trying to not use the dome light, and I was trying to put Pink 69 on my drag, and I spilled the entire thing in my lap.
Uh,
Oh,
Yeah. And I sat there, and you have the good angel and you have the devil, and the angel's like, you should go home. This is not going to work out well for you. And the devil's like, you're already here. You should go hunting. So I said, oh, I'll just go hunting. It'll be fine. It's not a big deal. And of course, this is, deep rut at this point. And so I had cleared my trail very well, all the logs off of it and everything. Of course, you have the Osage orange. Do you know what that is? Those green balls that fall off of trees.
hmm.
We have
no.
these, they're they call them Jesus Christ trees too, because they have these super bad thorns that stick out. Anyway, they have these huge um, green balls on them that the deer like to chew on. And so those will fall off. And so I try to keep them off the path because it's like stepping on a marble, if you can imagine, in the middle of the dark. So I'm walking, and I have my drag on that it only had about this much of the tinks on it. And I'm walking to my blind, and I, I wear like muck boots, and I was like, thunk. And I thought, huh, that was really solid. Whatever that, I was like, did a tree fall? Because I didn't want to turn on my hat light or anything. And I thought, huh. And about that time, I could feel something breathe on me, like I could feel its breath. And then I may have peed myself a little. I'm not positive because I mean, I was already, soaked anyway, so it didn't really matter at that point. But I was just like, oh my God. And I can just remember, like when you shoot your first deer and your heart's just a pounding.
Yeah.
Mine was doing that because I was like, I don't know what I'm up against here. And then in the east, the sky was just getting a little patch of light in it to where I could make out this huge rack on this deer. I couldn't make out his body, but I saw his rack, and I was like, "Oh my God, I am going to get impaled." And I just thought, hmm, well, what do I do to get myself out of this? Because my arrows are in the quiver. I can't do anything there. I have a knife on my side, but you're not allowed to have a sidearm, so I don't have any kind of defense. And I thought, well, what should I do? So I literally just stomped on the ground right where I was standing, and I don't even know why I did it. I did it, and he actually took off. And I was so thankful because I was like, and I did not go hunting that day, but I was so thankful that whatever that was just enough to startle him because he couldn't figure out what I was either. Um, but that was enough that he took off and he ran away. And I never did see him again. I never saw him on like any of our cameras either. So what he probably thought I was an alien or something, but that's okay. But I went home and changed all my clothes and went back to bed.
Right after that encounter you did, you
Oh,
didn't hunt?
yes.
Yeah.
No, nope, nope. I had no energy left after that. It was like all the adrenaline had just ran out.
So that's interesting. You can't carry a sidearm.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, we can do that here, even during
Yeah.
archery season.
yeah,
And I mean, it's for self defense, right? So
Right.
you think at the very least you guys would be able to carry for self defense.
and
If you
yeah. And I brought that up. Our DNR, how do I say this? They brought in the multiflora rosebush. They brought in Asian beetles, Asian carp. All three have done just real great for our environment. So they don't always make the best choices, but they had released bobcats here in 2001. And I asked, went to hunter safety with my daughter, took it again with her. And at the end, I asked the DNR, he says, "Do you have any questions, anybody?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Why is it that we can't carry a sidearm when you have released bobcats into all these properties?" And he was like, "Well, I haven't." And I said, "I have 8x10 glossies that show your truck, you letting these cats out of a box on my property." And of course, he turned beet red and was mad as all get out. And I said, "I'm not trying to call you out on that, except to say, shouldn't we be able to defend ourselves? If I climb in a tree and a cat's up there and it's got kittens, I mean, I'm in trouble."
Mm.
And he says, "Well, that's not how they work." And I said, "Well, they're opportunistic animals, so I don't know that you know exactly what they're going to do." So it's unfortunate, but they will not let us. And in our state, they're doing everything they can to make sure that we can't have a majority of weapons. So that's
yeah,
their push. Yeah.
yeah, that's right. You're in Illinois.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. There's a push here in Colorado to outlaw mountain lion hunting, bobcat hunting.
Oh,
They're calling them all trophy hunts
oh.
because
Well,
they
when
don't
they
believe
start
we would eat a mountain
taking,
lion.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't either. But you still have to keep their population in control,
Mhm.
Yeah.
because they are opportunistic. And the first year that they were released, our neighbor, their horse had a foal, and it was found dead the next morning, and it was just sliced down its side.
Mhm.
And of course, the DNR was like, "Oh, that's coyote." Well, it's not a coyote kill. We know what a coyote kill looks like. We've been doing this for, a long time. And then, of course, he had the big animal vet come out and he was like, "That's a cat kill." And so they are opportunistic. So and if you get them into populated areas, which eventually they would do to a
Mhm.
degree. So, yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we can defeat it. It's not there yet, but
Yeah,
anybody who thinks that's a good idea has never seen one in the wild or hasn't had any cattle to care for or anything like that.
exactly.
So
Yeah, yeah, because that puts stresses and strains on them for sure. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So well, what's your next story? You said you had
So
a
my
few of them.
next one, oh, I do. Yeah. So I've been doing this a while. So the next one was 2008 in Illinois. The DNR was ever so gracious that they gave us an extra season in January for does. They don't do it every year. They get to pick and choose when they do, which so be it. But anyway, that year they did, and I had 3 tags, so I was like, "Yep, we'll go out." So I hunted in a bigger group at that time. There was 13 of us, and of course, like any of their kids, daughters or sons that were up and coming hunters, we always took them. They didn't carry guns, and they had to sit with one of the blockers and stuff. So that's what I did that year. I had one of the guys I hunt with, his son, sitting next to me. So the place we were at, it has a huge pond, a lot of open field, and then some, is tillable. Some of it would be more like what you would graze cows on, and then a lot of big timber and a creek that runs through that. So it's perfect for this, and four-wheeler trails that they've cleared out from, inside the timber. And so you could literally sit just off one of those trails up by like the fence line and have the walkers, walk towards you. And the deer were, as long as they weren't like running and being super loud, they would just mill up right past you. And so we had a doe. She came about 75 yards, and then she was actually going to go a different direction. And I was like, I'll just take her. So I shot her, and she went down immediately. And I waited a couple minutes. I said, was teaching him, like, you go up, you see if their eyes are open or closed. If they're closed, poke them, stay to the backside of them, make sure that they're gone. Always have a knife ready in case you have to, do what you got to do if they're not completely, gone. And I looked down, and she had female parts, like she had been nursing a baby, which she shouldn't have been doing in January. She had a baskety type rack that was still in velvet. And I was like, okay, one of these things does not belong here. It was odd. And of course, all the guys come running up, and they're like, we'll leave it to you to shoot a hermaphrodite. So, yeah. So, we get her turned over so that I can start to field dress her. And as soon as I got down through like her milk sacks and stuff, she had all male parts inside. They were just inside. So she really was an odd deer. So that deer, I did call the DNR, which it was a different guy. That guy had retired. And Western Illinois University, which is here in Macomb, about 30 miles from here, their science department came down and got it and said, oh, we'll let you know what we find out. We'll do some genetic testing. And I never heard anything out of them, but she definitely was an odd deer, which now in 2023, she'd be like in with the rest of them, right?
Right.
She doesn't know
Yeah,
what she wants to be.
that is strange. That's too bad you didn't hear back from him. That would have been.
I know. That's my curiosity. I wanted to kind of know what all, was going on with her, because to look at her from the side, it looked like a doe, and the velvet was kind of a whitish gray. And so it blended in. I didn't even see it. And it was a teeny tiny rack. And it was under the limit where you can still tag it as a doe. But yeah, that was odd. So that was a weird one for me. And I've never seen another one, and I'm okay with that.
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder how common that is in the animal kingdom. You know, you rarely hear about stuff like that, and it's probably like a once in a lifetime thing. Like you will probably never see that again.
Yep.
Just really unique situation. I've never
Yeah.
seen.
The DNR guy, 2 years in a row, I had odd. So I had that. And then this little one, which isn't the other story that I have, but I did shoot a 3-legged doe as she was jumping over a fence, and she ran like nobody's business prior to, and once I shot her, she ran another 30 yards. And when I got up to her, she was missing the right front arm, but I mean, it was just gone. Like there was no wound there. There was nothing. And I was like, oh, that's odd. So I'm field dressing her. And of course I do it like I'm doing surgery. I'm like, perfect cuts and, get everything out of the way. And she had no scar tissue and no joint at all. She had no shoulder joint in that right side. And so the DNR guy came out and he's like, "You again," and he said, he thought that she was a triplet birth and that the first two
Hmm.
born get the majority of the nutrients, and this was a mutation because she never had that digit. It just wasn't ever there. And that's why she ran normal. I mean, completely normal. I knew it wasn't an injury. So
Right.
that one was pretty neat. Yeah.
Huh.
Huh.
And so you have a third story for us?
I do, if you have time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
all
Oh yeah. We
right.
got plenty of time.
All right. So, my daughter is a good hunter also, and she's got 2015 eyesight, which is disgusting.
Oh.
I wish I had that. But we were hunting gun season, and we were down on our property. And on the east side of our property, we have a old railroad that the rails were pulled up in like 71 or 72. But it's perfectly canopied, the trees. It's a really good place to put your stands up in trees. And so we were sitting on the other side of that property, our neighbor's property that let us hunt there. And it was her first year hunting where she could carry a gun. You have to be about 15, 16 and walked with us 4 or 5 years and know everybody's layout, property and stuff. And so we were sitting on a root system. They had cleared out some of that fence row, and this root system off of one of those Osage orange trees is what they're called, is massive. I mean, it's bigger than a truck. So she was sitting on one side of it. I was sitting up on the dirt. It was dry dirt clod, and we were just sitting there facing where the walkers were going to be coming. And off to my left, about 100, 110 yards, was one of the other guys and his son sitting there. And so, we have to wear orange here. And so I took my hat off and I flipped it like that. And the next thing I know, you don't hear the sound, but the dirt clod in between me and my daughter went poof. And then I heard boom. And my daughter hit the dirt. Her gun went in the mud.
Uh,
She hit the dirt, and I turned because I knew where it came from. The sound, and he takes off, and I was like, "Son of a, you know what?" And so I beelined over there, and I got across the barbed wire fence. I don't even remember crossing it, but I did, unscathed. And so I got over and I caught up to him. By the time we got up by another 100 yards, I caught up to him. And I just was like, "Dude, what the heck were you doing?" I said, "Did you not see me take off, my hat and wave it?" And he says, "Well, it looked just like a deer tail because your ponytail looked like a white tail. Because normally in the summertime, I always do like highlights and end up pretty blonde. And, a blonde ponytail sticking out of your hat." And I'm like, "Okay, I can understand where if I was wearing all brown and all you saw was, the blonde ponytail, how it would look like a tail. But I waved the orange at you." And I was like, "You shot between me and my daughter, and we were 8 feet apart, with a 12 gauge." And I'm really chewing on him pretty good. And finally, his son makes it up the hill to where we are, and here's us discussing this, and I'm trying to be nicer because the younger kids coming up. And he was like, "Well, Dad can't see orange." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he had hunted with our group probably 5 or 6 years at this point. Um, and I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean you can't see orange? And he goes, "Well, actually, he doesn't even see color. He sees gray, black, and white." And
wow.
so, yeah. So I said, "So
Wow.
orange looks like what?" And he says, "White." And I said, "You're dangerous." And I said, "And you should not be hunting. You won't be hunting on this property ever again, not with a gun." I'm like, You can bow hunt, we'll still let you bow hunt stuff." I said, "But you shouldn't even be hunting with other people unless you're the walker. You shouldn't be blocking. If you see guys coming through the timber, you look for that orange, where it's safe to shoot and where you're not
Right.
supposed to." But I just was like, wow. I was like, he literally can't see any of that. And some of the other guys in the group, um, I was the only girl in the group. They were like, well, it wasn't that bad. And I said, no, that's pretty stupid. That's a
Yeah.
pretty big mistake to
Yeah.
make because
Yep.
you can't take that back, you know. And so I got divorced that following year and had moved and hunted with the group I'm with now. And that same guy, they let him come back and hunt with them, and he shot and almost hit one of their sons. And then all of a sudden they were like, "Oh, yeah, he's dangerous. We probably shouldn't let him hunt." And I was like, "Bingo." So yeah, that was pretty scary. That day I was kind of in shock. It took a little while because you see that dirt,
Hmm.
when something's shot like that, you see that before you're going to hear, the explosion of the gun going off the bullet. And so there was just that little bit of time between the two that I just was like in shock of like, I can't believe this just happened.
So
So
was he shooting through some scrub oak or trees or something?
nope,
Like,
nope,
is it
nope.
an open field?
Yep. I was
And
sitting He was sitting inside a fence line that they had just cleaned. So it literally was just the fence. So it was, just the barbed wire. He's sitting right next to open barbed wire. I'm 110 yards this way up into an open field that had three dirt clods of tree root systems that they had pulled, and those were just sitting up like that. So I was even sitting up higher, which should have made me even easier to see. But no, it was just that when I did that and my ponytail came up, which is why I go dark every October now. I go That ruined me. They're like, "Oh, I like your blonde hair," and I'm like, "Well, I like to be alive."
Right.
yeah,
Because we actually hunt the property next to him. So I'm always like, do you see his truck? I just want to make sure I'm far enough inside the timber behind some of these big cottonwoods and big oak trees so that I don't get shot at. But yeah, that was pretty sketch to say the least.
maybe you can get some of those blaze orange scrunchies for your
Yeah,
ponytail.
he
Well, it
can't
wouldn't
see
help
the
with this guy.
orange. Yeah, yeah, it would help with the average person, but yeah, with him, he cannot see any color, which hindsight it kind of made sense. I can remember a couple times going up to deer camp, um, where it was like I thought his 3-year-old dressed him because stuff didn't match. But all my friends are guys; they don't care what, they don't have to match. So I was like, eh. But then after that was said, I thought, oh, yeah, I've seen him wear stuff that absolutely should not be together, but he doesn't see color. So, and I think his wife is like, she lets him go out however he wants, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I've had bullets fly by me on a couple different occasions, and it's a uneasy feeling, like.
It, yeah,
Um, and we actually did a video on that, just about hunting safety. It's just amazing some of the stuff you see and hear over the years when once you've been hunting a long time,
yeah,
and you see some really crazy stupid stuff over the years.
Yeah.
you
Well, and
do.
it's just like anything else. Like, 95% of us are overly safe.
Yep,
And then you just get the 5% that are just
stupid.
what the rest of us get angry at.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Now in Colorado, do you guys have to have a hunter safety course?
We do.
yeah,
Yeah, okay. Because I know there are some states that do. I don't think every single state does. Um, and in Illinois, when my husband was going to school, he's older than me. He's 9 years older than me. Hunter safety was actually done in the school system, like, whatever, fifth, sixth grade, something like that, was done right in the school system where it wasn't in Iowa. When I lived over there, I had taken hunter safety course over at a gun place over there. And our guy over there, and it was all kids. I think I was maybe 8, and the majority of us were 8, 9, 10-year-old kids. And the thing that he did, that my mom at the time, she was like, "Oh, you poor thing, how horrible for you to have to see something like that." And I was like, "No, it makes sense. That's exactly what they should have done." So at the end of it, it was kind of like Gallagher with watermelons. He put watermelons out at, like, I don't know, 30 yards, and put like just a face on it, nobody specific, but just a face, and had you shoot that. And he was like, "That's why you don't walk around with your gun without the safety on."
Mm.
He says, "Because if you bump something and you hit somebody, that's what it looks like." And watermelon,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it stuck with me. And that is something that when I was raising my kids, my daughter was very good. She, listened very well. My son is 5 years younger than her. He's 27 now, and he's ADHD. And I had him with a 410, just, practicing in the backyard. He was going to take hunter safety course that year. And I'm like, red is dead, when it comes to that. Keep it on safety. If you can see red, it's not safe. Um, and we were going over that, and we had people over on the back porch and doing a barbecue, and he's holding the gun and he swings as he's talking to them. And I look, and sure enough, it had red. And I said, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "Well, I can't remember everything." I said, "Oh, you are not ready." So
Yep.
actually, while he lived with me, until he was 19 when he graduated, he never did take hunter safety course with me. And actually, just when he was 26, he finally got, grown into his brain, and took hunter safety course on his own, and concealed carry, and another gun course. Um, and he did all that on his own. I'm one of those kind of parents that it's my job to raise you and teach you till 18. It's not that I won't be there to help you with advice and stuff, but I am not raising you once you're a certain age.
Yeah.
So he had to take that on his own and do it when he felt like he was mature and ready to do so, which I was glad he did it. So, but I think that hunter safety course is I think that's important to have for that safety aspect.
Yeah. And earlier you talked about having some kids along on your hunts, but you
Hmm.
didn't let them carry a gun. Our dad would make us carry a Daisy BB gun,
Oh,
and so we would have to demonstrate gun safety the entire time
Yeah.
before
oh,
we were allowed to buy a tag. So
oh, that
um,
makes sense too.
yeah, and it worked out,
Yeah,
and so I did that with my kids, and it's just a good way to kind of watch them to see how they're handling the gun, and
yeah.
um, just kind of working that muscle memory too, right? Where you should
Hmm.
be holding your gun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
smart. That's a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned earlier about cold packing meat, and I know you have a
Hmm.
video out there,
Yeah.
but I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, what are the benefits? Why do you do it?
Yeah. Um, so as I'm sure you can tell, I'm kind of a patriot. Um, and that same grandmother who taught me about deer hunting and all that and went through the depression, her family had come through Auschwitz. So, she had family come over during that time. Um, and so she talked about, all the stuff with Hitler and things like that, and how, she said, "It's not the government's job." She literally looked at me and told me one day, I think, and she said, "It is not the government's job to take care of your sorry And I was like, "Okay." And she says, "Any government that wants to take care of every one of your needs has an ulterior motive. And don't forget that." And she just said it stone cold to me like that, and was so dead serious. And it's like one of those things that I just never ever forgot. um, you know, some people are like, "Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist," and I'm like, "Is it a conspiracy when it keeps happening?" So I've always been somebody who's a prepper planner. Um, so I'm, like I said, I'm very OCD. I'm regimented. I have my ammo boxes, all my stuff. Um, and I like to have, supplies. So I also, since I do eat meat and that's the majority of my food, I was like, well, I've got all these seeds for food that I could plant in the garden forever because they're, heirloom seeds. So you can reuse the seeds from each of those plants every single year.
Mm.
And I have water and I have probably 55 pounds of Redmond salt, different things like that. And I was like, but what about meat? And I had cold packed meat for several years to a degree. I'd do like, I don't know, a quarter of a deer every year. But the last 4 years, I probably have put up about 75 pounds of beef, chicken, deer, trying to think what else. Oh, I've canned butter because you can butter. So it's really not a hard process. The worst thing is that our guy that owns the company there in a small town that we pick up our LP tanks. I think at first he thought I might be making meth because I was using, those little cylinders. I think they're 20 or 30 pounds or whatever. And I would go through 7 or 8 of them just in the summertime because I was cold packing, plus I was canning the stuff out of the garden. Luckily, I'm not like emaciated and have wounds all over me. So, and I have my teeth.
Right.
Um, but yeah, they kind of gave me that hairy eyeball look a couple times, and I was like, I'm canning, I'm, doing this. But it's such a simple process of just cutting up whatever meat that you want, and putting it in a pint or a quart jar. I always put in ribeye or tallow. You can put in either one, a little bit on top, and like half a teaspoon of salt. And I would use like Redmond's salt for that. And just because it doesn't have any of the other junk in it, it's a really good product. I think the Celtic salt they talk about is pretty good. I haven't canned with that, so I don't know. I can't attest to that. But you put that in for preservative, and then you put it in a pressure cooker, and you do an hour and 15 minutes of pressured at like 10 pounds for hour 15 minutes for pints and an hour and a half for quarts. And so some of that cooking process, you are going to lose some of the nutrition, but you're going to when you cook it, whether it's on a grill or anything else. So I just do that because I like to be prepared for anything.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I'd never
And
even heard of it until I saw your video. I thought, wow, that's
oh
interesting.
wow.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can, and a lot of people will cold pack fish, which like trout. I'm trying to think what was the one, buffalo carp. My grandma used to cold pack buffalo carp. It was so good. And you really can cold pack. I've done hamburger. Um, I haven't done the one. I had a lady say, "Can you cold pack bacon?" And I'm like, "Well, you probably can." And so I did find that you can do that. I probably won't be doing that because I switched to the lion version of carnivore about 8 months ago. I was getting, it almost was like gout in a couple of my fingers because I think I was eating so much of the bacon and pork products. And so I just kind of cut those out. I tried to make some bacon of my own, which I've done before with pork belly, because I thought, well, maybe I'm getting those issues because of whatever they're using to cure their stuff with. But I did it with my stuff and I still had that. I woke up the next day and I was like, oh, I feel that in those two knuckles again. I was like, dang it, which is okay. I mean, bacon's good, but ribeyes are better.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I love
Well,
ribeyes.
do you have any more stories or?
That's probably the only ones I can tell online.
All right. Well,
Yeah,
maybe we can make an adult theme one someday.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know they always say that select your audience, not for children.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Because when you hunt with, and it's pretty much been my theme my whole life is the neighborhood. I grew up in a small town. I think we had 12,000 people total in that town, and it was every ethnic group and pretty blended. But I lived in an all boy neighborhood, so I liked baby dolls, but I was never a Barbie doll fan because nobody's going to look like a Barbie doll anyway. So I was like, why would I play with a Barbie doll? But I always was outside. I was climbing trees and doing that kind of stuff. So, and the first two jobs that I had, other than I was a CNA and I worked at Hardee's when I was real young, but were factories. And so it was 95% male. And so I've always gravitated, that's my friend base is more male because I don't like, and I know I'm going to get some hate on this and I don't care. Um, that like I would work in a factory. We built semi trailers. We built the boxes, the box trailers. And so welding and riveting and stuff like that. And I worked in one department that's where all the females who worked there were at. And it drove me insane. They were backbiting and talking about what somebody had done to them 17 years ago. And they could tell you what they were wearing. And I was like, can't you just go beat the crap out of each other in the parking lot and we'll have a beer after work? Like,
Yeah.
let it go. And so when I became a nurse, let me tell you, that was probably the biggest eye opener because the nursing field when I became a nurse was probably 99% female based. I'm glad to see that it has more men in the field. But that was rough that first couple of years getting out because I think on the lines of most men. It's just get it done, no fluff, don't need I just do it. And that nursing, when I went in and it was all these females, it was the same thing. The lady training me was a great nurse, but she was like, don't want to train with her because 13 years ago, this is what she said. And I'm like, shit, I can't remember what I said yesterday, and it
Yeah.
just was like, wow. So, yeah, so I guess I'm a little bit of an oddity. I have one good close girlfriend and that's good enough. Otherwise, my friends are guys and I like it that way because if you get into a tiff, it's over the next day and I kind of like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My brother and I get in a tiff. He breaks my collarbone, and then we.
That seems to be a common theme. My children's dad, his brother broke his collarbone too. He was the younger one. So are you the younger brother?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
He came home on leave from the Navy, and he'd been gone for 2 years. I think almost
Yeah.
2 years straight.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, he came home, and I was about as tall as he was for the first time. So I did something dumb and picked a fight.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we weren't intentionally fighting hard. We were wrestling around like brothers do. And
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Dad was cooking grills on the steak or steaks on the grill. We had dinner was ruined because we had to go to the hospital. And
Oh,
yeah, that was
yeah.
happy about that.
I'll bet he was not happy. Yeah. Plus the bill for the hospital. Of course, back then, that bill was a lot smaller than it would be now, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, your
Yeah.
copays used to be $25 back in the day.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
can't we get back to that?
Well, that's funny because, my patients know that I'm just an open book on what, the healthcare sick care system is. Um, and so I always say, I don't know, I'm not old enough to remember when Nixon did this, of course, because I think it was about the year I was born, but I do know Nixon is really the one that pushed for insurance companies to be something. So back prior to that, you didn't have insurance. You didn't have to have Blue Cross Blue Shield to go to the hospital to have a baby. And the mom and the baby stayed in the hospital for a week and it was like $200.
Mm.
And everybody made a decent living. But the insurance company and the insurance lobbyist is huge. I mean, you cannot believe how huge it is. And they are, and Medicare and Medicaid, CMS, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, they set those prices, which I didn't realize until I had been in the field and actually was working in the cath lab because you get to see those reps come in for like Plavix and different medications and get to listen to their BS and stuff. And they were, talking about how our patients would come in for a heart cath. let's say you had a heart attack and we fixed a vessel, but we saw another one that's problematic, but it's not causing you a heart attack right now. We'll let your kidneys repair from the dye that we use, and you'll come back in 2 weeks, and then we'll go in after the other one. Well, prior to you coming in that day, they tell you not to take your regular blood thinner, but they'll give you 4 baby aspirins at the hospital. So I would call the patients and say, don't forget to hold your medicine. And when you get here, we've got the 4 baby aspirin. And then one of those little old ladies called back in, and she was feisty. She was one of my favorites. And she was like, do you know what they charge me? And I said, no, I don't. We don't know. And it's $75 for each baby aspirin. So 4 of those. Uh-huh. So
Wow.
Wow.
yeah. So that day I decided, this is my cath lab, my holding area. I'm in charge. I'm the one that calls the patients the night before. Got it. And I would just say, hold your medicine, whether it be like Coumadin, warfarin, which is another blood thinner, or any of them, insulin, stuff like that. And I'd say, oh, by the way, bring or take right before you come in 4 baby aspirins. Oh, the doctor said you'll give them to me. And I said, oh, well, they're not given. This is what it's going to cost you per pill if you take the ones that we have here. And the doctor, one of the doctors, he was not happy because our hospital that I worked for at the time was a non-for-profit. So that kickback doesn't necessarily go to them as much, where the other doctors, some of them that worked in the hospital, they had rights there, worked for a corporation that was for profit. So every pill, every stent, every 2x4 of gauze, they got part of that money, and they knew it down to the penny. And the one that we actually got rid of, he no longer has a license because he was unethical. But anyway, he come up to me and he says, "You're cutting into my Porsche money." And I said, "Well, how many do you need? You got 4." And I was like, "Why are we charging this crazy amount?" And he says, "Well, Medicare sets the prices." And at the time I was still, you're still kind of naive when you see the commercials like Medicare fraud and this and that coming from Medicare. And I thought, well, you guys are causing half of that problem. And then when you do turn into them something that you see that absolutely is fraud, hands down, you've got the paper to prove it. You got the CDs we do a CD while we're doing a heart cath. That captures everything that's going on during the heart cath, and they just sit there silently. And it's like, well, I said, you say on all these commercials, if you see Medicare fraud, turn it in. I said, we have this hands down. We have over 1,000 patients that have went through this one person, and this is what's happening. And I'm like, he's making $3 million a month, just him, for that place.
Wow.
And they
Jeez.
were like, well, and I was like, oh, okay. And so unfortunately, we had to go a lot higher than them to finally get that taken care of. But we did. We got that person taken care of. So
Good.
yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I just
scary.
watched. I just watched a movie, and I can't remember the name of it. But it was how some drug company brought this drug to market, and how they were kind of not, what's the word I'm looking for, like giving these doctors all these perks to prescribe more and more
All
than
the
what
time.
really what's necessary. And I was like, holy crap! You
Yeah.
look at this stuff, and
It
it's
happens every day.
man,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we're the lab rats.
And that's just it. We are. So down in the cath lab, we would have these reps come from the big, like Plavix, uh, Xarelto, Eliquis, all these blood thinning companies. They would come and say, we're going to go do education, and to get CEUs, continuing education credits that you need to have for your licensure and stuff. And out of 8 years, I went to one of them, and we spent maybe 15 minutes going over the drug, and they stayed there for like 3 or 4 hours and schmoozed. It was like a $5,000 bill at this restaurant down in this town that this guy spent. And it's like on the card of, his company. And I'm like, that's costing the people who are buying the medicine, because you're out here schmoozing this schmuck of a doctor who you know is corrupt, so you love him because he's putting more stents in people even if they don't need them, and then they have to have your blood thinner. And it was just this big circle, and I literally, I had to put in my notice and leave that. And I loved that job. I loved doing a heart cath. I loved seeing, I don't love somebody coming in having a heart attack, but it was so amazing to bring somebody back,
Mhm.
and which was actually God working through us. We aren't the ones that do it, but to do CPR on somebody, get a stent in, open up an artery, and they walk out 2 days later. That is the best feeling. But then when they had this one doctor out of the five who, he literally would put a $30,000 stent in your artery with no blockage there to open, just to make money. And we kept going to the powers that be there, risk management, higher, Medicare, and we literally had to go to the FBI to finally get anything done. And the first FBI agent that we used from Springfield, Illinois, I can't say 100% that he was bought, but we only heard from him once, and so we had to go outside of the states. Um, but yeah, and it happens every day. I mean, they didn't even blink an eye, because when I took the information to the top echelon of that place, she just literally looked at me and was like, "Oh, that is horrific. This is horrible." And I said, "We did 12 heart caths January 1st of 2011. 7 of those people were dead in less than 24 hours. Doesn't that raise a red flag?" you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
And she was like, "Uh-huh." But she's like, "Uh-huh." Her eyes are like, "Yeah." And then she was like, "But do you know the money he makes?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I do, but I don't really care, because that's not why we're supposed to be doing this." I said, "I know we have to keep the lights on. I mean, I
Right.
understand that, but I'm like, we don't have to make a killing to help people." But unfortunately, every year it seems like more and more that's what we go to, just like with diabetics. Um, unless they're a type 1, that's a metabolic disease, and it can absolutely be turned. I have a 74-year-old patient, who now is a follower of mine. He had never been on YouTube, but he was a patient of mine. He graduated, but in 3 months of going carnivore, he went from 10.9 hemoglobin A1C to 6.7. And 3 months after that, he went down to 5.4, and actually was able to fire his diabetic doctor, who told him previous, when he got down to 6.7, oh, he doesn't like to see patients that are diabetic much under 7. And I'm like, what? Why wouldn't you want somebody to be in the normal range? But, if you're a specialty doctor that treats diabetics, if that person's no longer diabetic, you legally can't have them as a patient. And
Right.
so there goes that income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome though. What started me on keto, because I was keto before carnivore,
Mm, yeah.
but I got some lab work back one time that this was last December, so a year ago almost. And they said, "Yeah, you're a type 2 diabetic now." I've been
Mm,
told for a long time I was
pre.
pre diabetic,
Mm,
and and then during open enrollment at work this year, they always have a health fair, and they had a table with A1C. So I was like, "Oh man, I'm gonna go get it checked." And I was like, "It was, what was it, Doug? 5.4 or 5.6,
oh,
something like that."
good.
I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." So I
That's
was
not
super.
even pre-diabetic anymore. That's good.
Yeah, I was super stoked about that. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So hypertension and borderline diabetic, was that the only 2 health issues you had?
oh no,
No.
that I a couple months ago I went into my online lab or patient portal,
Hmm.
and man, they had like 12 things listed out that, and some of them I don't ever remember a doctor talking to me about. And I was kind of irritated when I was reading through that, thinking, if he told me about this, I don't remember it. But honestly, I don't think they told me about it. And
Mm-hmm.
and then you get to thinking about how the doctors interact with you. Like you said, they want to push pills and not and band-aid the problem and not
Mm-hmm.
come up with a natural solution, a healthy solution. And I never paid attention to this stuff until we started going carnivore, really. Because even when I was keto,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't doing all the research that I do now. And
Yeah.
it's and I still, it's not my wheelhouse. So when I talk about it, I sound like an idiot, but I know
No.
I'm doing all the right stuff.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and everybody has to learn and look up their stuff. But the sad thing about that, with you looking up on your portal and seeing all these extra diagnoses and things that they said they talked to you about, they, and this is sad to say, but I'm just going to be honest, those, each of those code, they have a code. It's called an ICD-10 code that goes with hypertension. That's I-10. You know, you have your E78.5, high cholesterol. When they code that and put that in your chart, they get to send that off to your insurance company and they get paid more for certain ones. And so that's why some of those end up on your chart, whether they ever talk to you or not. They're supposed to bring it up, whatever it is, but that doesn't always, in fact, I'd say probably doesn't happen most of the time, unfortunately. But that again is a money game, and they know certain ICD-10 codes are a higher payer. And so that's what they're going to key on, even if you don't have it, or they may not say anything about it, yet they put it in your chart, which is sad because that follows you. And to get a diagnosis taken off, I was able to get off depression, anxiety medicine 3.5 years ago after 6 months on carnivore, and weaned myself slowly off of Effexor, which I took at the time because it kept the people in my life, not really in my life, but the outside world that was cuckoo, kept me from injuring anybody. So it was good medicine to take at the time. But I used to say it's the medicine that keeps the stupid people alive. And I know that doesn't sound nice, but that was just what it was. And, but anyway, I'd weaned myself off of it. And it took me till this year refusing to go inside that doctor's office until that code was taken off my chart. I said, I'm not stepping in the office. Well, we got to see patients. I said, then fix the code. And that wasn't the nice thing I said, but I said, fix that code. I have not been medicated in 3.5 years. I don't need to do anything other than exercise and shoot my guns once in a while to feel better and eat this way. And so I want that off my chart. And I mean, it was a struggle to get that off. Um, and I recommend that if it's something that you see on there that you don't think is accurate, that's probably a discussion you need to have with them. Because if it's
that
on there, they should be discussing it.
every single thing on that list, I think, well, I know I've cured. I could remove all of them except the only one is that I still
Hypertension.
need to get tested. Well, that too, but the other one that I still need to get tested is the proteinuria. I'm passing too much protein.
Which is fine. They do that test, but you're going to be okay. So their lab ranges are for people who are on the standard American diet.
Yeah,
Well, we're going to be spilling more protein into our urine because we're eating more protein. So another discussion I have with patients is I have a lady who was like 90 and she was like, well, they said that this lab is off. And I said, you are 90 years old. Don't you think that your organs are probably not working like they did at 16? And they're like, well, probably not. And I said, these lab ranges are the same from the day you are 16 till the day they put you in the ground. That's the normal ranges. And they don't take into account you're an athlete or, this or your age. They don't take any of that into account. And then you're out of their normal range and there goes another diagnosis and another pill. And, your heart's a muscle. So your blood pressure as you age shouldn't be 120/60 all the time, because I always tell people it's like your bicep. If you sat there and just did this all day long, and didn't do it with the other arm, do you think this one's going to get bigger? It's gonna. And your heart's a muscle and does the same thing. And so as it gets bigger and the walls get a little thicker, the muscle, you should expect to have a little bit of an elevated blood pressure. I mean, you don't want it high, super high, but that would be normal. And so, proteinuria, unless you're having stones, I, proteinuria is just it's kind of that mythical unicorn that they throw out there because of course you're going to have proteinuria when you're eating, protein. So
Right.
yeah, I in fact the last time I said I'm not doing a urine test, I can test for that if I want. So, and then what about you, Doug? Did you have health issues that you did this for, or what was your
Um,
reason?
Not me personally. My wife had a lot of gastrointestinal issues,
Ah,
and I kind of stumbled onto this, like just trying to find something for her because she had stomach pain daily for
mm,
almost a decade. And stumbled on a bunch of videos, Michaela Peterson and all that stuff, and
yep.
I was like, hey, why don't you try this? But for me, it was just vanity and wanting to lose some weight. The weight that I put on over the years, I'm like, I'll do it with you. And she was resistant at first. But I was like, look, let's just do it. We're like 30 days, and then 30 days hit. We're like, okay, 60 days. Oh, okay, 90
Yep.
days, and then it's
Yep.
like, okay, well, we're not going to stop this ever now because we feel
Hmm.
too good.
Yeah.
So I personally was pretty lucky, but yeah, she was on thyroid medication. She's come off of that. Her gut issues have all but gone.
Yeah.
I think she's had one off day in the last 2 months.
Yeah.
So
That's pretty good. Yeah, and that's the other thing. I work in a health department, um, which people are always like, "You work in a health department? That's odd," because my belief system around certain things, you would think being in a health department that they kind of would be pushy on certain things that I don't agree with, but they weren't. They
mm,
were like, you do you, and we're okay with that. So I was like, okay, I'll work for you. And of course, they let me kind of take care of my patients the way that I think they need to be taken care of. And I take care of every patient as though they were a family member. I just feel like if you do that, you can't go wrong. But yeah, that's really, I'm glad that you stumbled onto Michaela Peterson. I actually watched a video, like a TED talk that she did just
that,
the other day where
yeah,
she went over all of those things that I mean, a hip replacement. I was like, holy moly.
yeah,
Um, but the thing that is so sad, and I'm glad your wife, it sounds like, didn't end up having to have this happen, but I see this a lot as I'm taking care of a lot younger people than even, I mean, like I said, I'm 52 and I have had some very young people that I'm taking care of in home health, which is odd. In the hospital setting,
mhm,
yeah, younger than me, I would expect, all the different ages, but they all have this scar right here. And I was like, oh, you had your thyroid removed. And it was like just this theme of these 30, 40-year olds where their thyroid is just trash. And I'm like, you don't eat fat? Do you eat butter? And they're like, oh no. And I'm like, you do know cholesterol starts the majority of all of your hormones. Your cholesterol is there because your brain, is up to 65% cholesterol, which it makes its own, but
mhm,
statins block it.
Yep.
And I'm like, you wonder why everybody's got ALS, MS, Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of these diseases. I'm like, it's because we're preventing the body from doing what it's supposed to do. God made a liver that makes 85% of your free floating, cholesterol that runs through your body. And I'm like, that wasn't on accident, or we wouldn't
mhm,
be here as a species. But every one of these girls, I just was like, they've trashed their thyroid. They have PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian disease or syndrome, which just is because their female hormones are just thrown out of whack because they're not making them because they're eating the standard American diet, and then they're trying to be healthy by not eating any kind of animal fat. And I'm like, and sometimes they'll listen. And the next day you might see them come in and they've got a Lotus drink, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I was right there with them though until I started doing my research, and it's like I, I whenever I would shoot a deer or an elk or anything and grind up the meat, I never added fat.
Oh,
So and I just started this in June. So
yeah.
now I got a freezer full of deer and elk that there's no fat
Oh,
added to it. So I'm adding it now as I
which,
thaw it out and
yeah.
Compare it
stuff. But it's
And I was
just
going to say, yeah.
I thought I was just eating super lean and super healthy. Um,
because the food
just
pyramid told us that.
yeah,
Exactly. Paid
which
for
is
by,
and
Yeah.
yeah, I mean it just infuriates me. It goes all the way back to that Ansel Keys and paying off these professors. It's all about the money, right? And so
it is.
and then they convince our government that they need to create this food pyramid. I mean, there's a whole big story behind how
Oh,
all this false information was put onto us. But when you try to tell other people that, you said conspiracy theorists.
yep.
No, this is a true
Yep.
story. Go look it up.
Well, and
Yep.
actually, I have something in my notes on my iPhone. I have a notes section, and I have like studies about cholesterol that were done many, 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 many years ago. K2D3 studies, cholesterol. I mean, all kinds of stuff that was done that they've known actually 100 years or right at 100 years. When I did my Meaty Monday last night with the girls, one of the ladies on there, she has 8 children, her and her husband, and the 8 children are carnivores. It's called Carnivore Family, and they're really cool. They're cool. But anyway, she was talking about how these people that follow them were saying how their children, like their ADHD and their seizures were going away. And she was like, that was so cool. And I said, well, of course that happened. Because if you look up where keto actually came from, it was the 1930s, and these big universities, medical schools, they took these children and they put them on a high fat keto diet, which then healed the brain because the high fat would go in and would cover, those areas. Because when they're having seizures or even those crazy impulsive thoughts, it's because it's like that. It's like if you laid your spark plug wire against the manifold and burn a hole in it and it's sparking out of that. Cholesterol is like the black tape you put around that spot, is how I like to, I'm a car person, so I like to use those analogies,
Right.
but it's like that. And that's what cholesterol is supposed to do, but that works for the brains. And then all of your nerves in your body have a covering over them. So it's just like the insulation on a wire, like that. It's called a myelin sheath. That is a phospholipid bilayer. So lipid is a fat. And so we oxidize just like the paint on your car and anything else oxidizes. So it gets notches out of those, just, like the brain does. And if you don't have the cholesterol, which is the first defense of healing in the body, is to send triglycerides there. And it makes a little patch over that, and then the healing comes. But if you're not taking that in, then you're going to have the nerve pain. You're going to have the memory issues. You're going to have Parkinson's. You're going to get those diseases. The first success story that I actually had a part of was the last year I worked for this corporate system. That's the nicest thing I can call them. I worked in a pain management clinic, and we had a lady with MS who was in her mid 40s, who was a LPN, a licensed practical nurse, um, and was wheelchair chair bound already. Her husband would roll her in, and bring her in. Super nice gal. And she was like, been to the neurologist hundreds of times and all these specialty places, everything's got to be a specialty, and had tried all the different medications, and they had thrown their hands up. And I said, okay. I said, well, would you be willing for me to, I'll make you up a menu plan. I will send you a grocery list of stuff. Would you be willing to try this? Let's just say for a month, to see if any of your symptoms get better. And she was like, what do I have to lose? And I said, I'm not a doctor. This is just freebie advice. And so she started doing it. And she also watches Dr. Berg, so she had seen some of that stuff, except she didn't like vegetables, and I was like, don't eat vegetables, that's fine. Don't have to, because my ancestors were Indians, and I don't think they were chasing around broccoli. Um, I highly doubt that's what they were following around and migrating. But after 6 months, she came back for a visit, and she was like, I have full sensation back in my legs. Now, she couldn't walk yet, but she was going to be starting therapy. And then it was another 6 months, and the big COVID stuff happened down at the hospital, and I was not working for a month because of my beliefs, and then went back to work for them for about 3 months. And so she came back, or actually, it was my last day. And her husband was sitting in our waiting room, and I was like, holy crap, did we miss somebody? And, I'm looking through the computer, and I was like, I don't see her on the list. And so I went out and I said, did you come to pick up a script, or is there something going on? I didn't know if she had a turnaround, something bad happened. And he said, no. And he just got this big smile on his face, and he looked to the front of the door, and she was walking in. Now, she didn't walk like you and I do, but she was walking in without anything, no walker or crutches. And I mean, I'm not a crier. Like, if I cry, most people usually run because it's not a good thing. But that day I was like, oh my God. And I said, what does your neurologist think? And he says, he thinks you're crazy, but it's working. And he said, I guess keep doing what's working. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And now she's back to work. She's working part-time at a nursing home in Missouri. So she's elated, that she was able to get that back. And she may never get back 100%. I don't know. But by doing standard American medical medicine and the standard American diet, she wasn't getting anywhere except worse. MS, travels up. So it's like starts in the feet, then you lose legs, you lose, and it just works its way up. So even if that can give her an extra 20 years of, being with her husband and her kids, I'm like, and everybody's like, aren't you afraid to get fired? And I'm like, been fired one time before, so I really don't care. I'm like, no, I'm going to do what is right. And if they want to fire me for that, then they can. I'm okay with that, because I said I only have one person to answer to at the end, and it's not an administrator of a hospital.
Yeah,
They're like,
that's so
okay.
sad that anybody would think that you, in the medical field, you would have to worry about getting fired for doing
yeah.
what's best for the patient.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, no.
It happens.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure it does. It just
Sad.
it's hard to hear.
Yeah.
Or hard to confirm what I thought.
And the thing is I haven't given up on all of the medical. I think there are still things out there that are good. I had a lady reach out to me on my YouTube channel the other day, and she was like, she's only been a nurse about 5 years, but she has common sense. So she's not like one of the young ones that doesn't have that common sense that seems to be lacking. And she was like, I'm getting out. And I said, no. Because I said, let me tell you what I see happening. And I said, this will implode eventually. It cannot get bigger, like it has been doing without it getting to a ceiling, and it's going to crash. And I said, when that happens, these nurses have been trained, pardon this, but it's piss poor. It's no bedside care. It's no patient advocacy. He said to give this medicine, I give it. Don't question it. Don't see that they're allergic to it. Nothing. And that's not the way it's supposed to be. And I said, so we have to have some of us that are, we have enough whiskers, we've been here a while, that we can help teach those people when we have to rebuild the system, because it can't stay the way it's going. It's not sustainable. And part of me doesn't want to see it completely crash, but part of me kind of does, because I think that's the only way to fix it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, wow. Looks like we kept you about a half hour longer than we told you we would. I hope we're not keeping you from anything.
Okay.
But
I'm good.
This has been a lot of fun, very eye-opening. I really appreciate you doing this. Okay, why don't you take a minute really quick and tell everybody where they can find you?
Okay, so on YouTube, you can find me at Eat to Your Health with Carnivore. Same on Instagram, except it's keto/carnivore because I couldn't get the keto off of there. And then Facebook, on there, I am under Laura P. Russell. I will warn people that I'm opinionated on certain things, and sometimes that'll be on. I try to keep it off my YouTube and Instagram, but I'm in jail a lot on Facebook. So if you can't find me, it's because I might be in jail. But I usually try to share some of that information out there. But that's where they can find me.
Cool.
All right.
Well, we kind of wanted to sign off with your tagline.
All right.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Meet,
Heat
eat,
and
and
repeat.
repeat.
Yep.
So
Alrighty.
that's very cool. I like that one. So
Yeah.
All right. Thank
Thanks
you.
for tuning in, everybody.
yeah, thanks for tuning in. And Laura, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. I had a blast.
Yeah, okay.
All right.